Hello, today I'll show you how animating in Procreate works. I'll also explain some quick tips for animating along with some methods. In Procreate, each layer of the artwork is like a frame of the animation, starting with the first layer and moving up to the top layer. Once you've created your animation, you can preview it or save it by tapping on the wrench, tapping Share, and then choosing whether you want to save your animation as a GIF, a PNG, or an MP4. Each of these has its own options for modifying the animation. For instance, if I tap on Animated GIF, I can set the speed of the animation, I can give it a transparent background, and then I can save it as either a web-ready or a full-resolution GIF. Now I'll show you some helpful tips for animating in Procreate. In Procreate, the size of the canvas determines how many layers you have to work with. If you want to check how many layers you have, tap on the wrench, tap Canvas, and then tap Canvas Information. Now you can see the number of layers used and the maximum number of layers. If you want to view a single layer while you're working, just tap and hold on the layer's visibility checkbox. When you want the other layers to reappear, tap and hold on the checkbox again. If you want a layer to stay on the screen for a longer period of time, just duplicate the layer a few times. If you want to end or begin the animation with a blank screen, just add a blank layer to the end or beginning of the animation. If you want to crop your animation after making it, tap on the wrench, tap Canvas, and then tap Crop and Resize. Then drag the sides to crop the animation. Now I'll explain some methods for animating in Procreate. The first method is to manipulate objects that are on the canvas. So for this example, I'm going to make this ball roll across the canvas. To start, I'll turn on the drawing guide to help me position the ball as it rolls. Then I'll tap on the arrow and move the ball where I want it to start. Then I'll duplicate the layer, tap on the arrow again, and move the ball slightly to the right. Then I'll use the green node to rotate it slightly to the right. Then I'll duplicate this layer and continue this process until the ball reaches the edge of the canvas. As the ball leaves the canvas, it will start to be deleted. So I'm going to duplicate the layer below this, move it to the top of the layer stack, and continue this process. I want the ball to disappear off the canvas completely, so I'll add a blank layer to the top of the layer stack. I also want the ball to roll onto the canvas, so I'll go to the beginning of the layer stack, duplicate the first layer, and then move the duplicated layer underneath the first layer. Then I'll tap on the arrow and move the ball to the left, and I'll rotate it slightly to the left as well. And then I'll continue this process. And then I'll add a blank layer to the beginning of the animation. Here's the finished animation. You can also make an object fade in or fade out. To make an object fade in, tap on the N and set the opacity to 0 to start. Then duplicate the layer and increase the opacity a bit. Keep doing this until the opacity reaches 100%. To make an object fade out, just tap the N and decrease the opacity slightly, then duplicate the layer and decrease the opacity a bit more. Continue to do this until the opacity reaches 0%. Here's the finished animation. You can also make an object change color. To make an object change color, just give the object a different color on each layer. Here's how the animation looks. You can also paint on an object. Just tap on the layer and press Alpha Lock. Then paint a bit, duplicate the layer, and paint a bit more. There are a couple of methods to animate multiple objects at once. If I want to rotate each of these stars separately, I can use the freehand selection tool to select a single star. Then I'll tap the arrow and rotate the star, and then repeat this process. Then I'll duplicate the layer and select each star and rotate them again. Now I can preview the animation. Another way to animate multiple objects is to group them. To do this, have each object on a different layer, then group them together by tapping on the top layer, swiping right on the layers below it, and then tapping Group. To move these butterflies separately, I'm going to start by duplicating this group. Then I'll tap on the purple butterfly layer and move the purple butterfly. Then I'll tap on the blue butterfly layer and move the blue butterfly. Then I'll duplicate this group and repeat the process. And here's the final animation. Another method is to draw layer by layer. Here I've turned the radial symmetry on. Now I'm just going to draw a simple design. Then I'll duplicate the layer, get a new color, and draw some more. I'll continue to do this, drawing layer by layer until I fill the canvas. To make this a bit more interesting, I'm going to duplicate the final layer, and then tap the Adjustments button, and tap on Liquify, and I'm going to twirl right over part of the canvas, and then I'll duplicate the layer, and do this again. Here's the finished animation. Sometimes it's easier to trace layer by layer. For instance, here I've written hello. I want this to appear slowly as if it's being written in the animation. To do this, I'll reduce the opacity of the original layer, then tap on the layer and press Select. Then I'll create a new layer above this, get the same brush that I wrote this with, and then begin to trace the word slowly. Then I'll duplicate the layer and continue this process until I trace the whole word. I want it to look like this animation deletes itself, so I'm going to reverse the layers. To do this, I'll start by renaming each of the layers with numbers. Then I'll duplicate the layers and move each of them to the top of the layer stack in reverse order. Then I'll turn off the original layer and add a blank layer to the beginning of the animation, and then add a blank layer to the end of the animation. And this is the finished animation. There are lots of ways to make artwork slowly appear in the animation. One way is to use a mask. To make this branch slowly appear, I'll tap on the N on the layer and reduce the opacity. Then I'll duplicate the layer and increase the opacity on this layer to 100%. Then I'll tap on this top layer and press Mask. Then I'll tap on the layer mask and press Invert. Make sure to get white for the color and then choose a brush. Now I'll just begin to paint over the branch, and you can see that it gets darker where I paint. Then I'll duplicate this layer and its mask, and then tap on the top layer mask and paint some more. I'll keep doing this until I've painted over the entire branch. Then I'll tap on the top layer mask and press Merge down, and then I'll duplicate this layer a few times so it stays on the screen for a while. Then I'll turn off the original artwork layer, and I'll add a blank layer above it. Here's the finished animation. Another method to reveal artwork is to erase and then reverse the layers. So for this, I'll make a copy of the original artwork layer, and then I'll turn the original layer off. And then I'll choose an eraser and begin to erase. Then I'll duplicate the layer and erase a bit more. And I'll keep doing this until I erase the entire branch. So now I'll just turn on all of the layers, including the original layer, and drag them in reverse order to the top of the layer stack. And here's the finished animation. So that was just a quick overview of animating in Procreate. Thank you for watching.